And let's move on and get started on today's topic. So the capability maturity model. This is not new. I am not a person who invents things, but I do have a talent for repurposing things or seeing things in one area that they're used and figuring out how to slide them over to another area. I think I can do this because I am not really a purist on any particular theory. I'm also not big on detail. For example, Institute of Professional Development or Institute for Professional Development. As I go into my 10th year of being the director of this department, every time I have to do an official communication, I am looking up, is it of, is it to? Those are the kind of details that don't stick with me. But that's like I say, then that allows me to move freely without being encumbered by details that others may get bogged down in. So the model can go by many names that you see on your screen. It can vary depending on the industry or field you're in or the specific use. For instance, business intelligence community has their own model there. If you're using the internet to search, you will find lots of maturity model options. You'll see all these names. So if you decide to look around, please broaden your search. I put all those names into a word cloud so we can talk about the definition of what a capability maturity model even is. So using the word cloud, the word maturity shows up the most. Maturity is a measure of how advanced or how developed you are. In American culture, we associate other words or other phrases and descriptors with maturity, such as wise. So in the chat, I would like you to think of a mature person and what adjectives or descriptors do you associate with maturity? And I encourage you to think beyond just physical age. So think about if you have a mature person in your workplace, what kind of descriptors or adjectives do you put with them? So I see Joan has shared experienced. Catherine says poised. Brian says confident. Pat also confident. Eliza wise. Yes. So you have hit on all the ones that I thought of as well. Brian's adding trustworthy. So someone who's able to handle things in a calm, cool demeanor, they can problem solve, they're experienced. Agreed. So when we think about the maturity model, we are thinking about those kind of words being associated with maturity, not just old. So, all right. The next kind of largest word in the word cloud is capability. So that's the power, ability to do something. For a person, it could be the capability of driving a car. For a household, it could be the capability of doing laundry. For a hotel front desk clerk staff, it could be the capability to check in a guest. For a leader, could be the capability of executing change. So that's what we're talking about with capability. Now, it's not just an individual person's capabilities or intelligence or characteristics that lead to mature capability. For instance, you could have a really smart, intelligent front desk staff at a hotel, but if their software is really klutzy, it could take them a long time to check in a guest. Or if the Wi-Fi connection is really slow, that could hinder as well or impede. So in a capability maturity model, we're looking beyond just individuals that work on that capability. The next kind of large word in the cloud is business. Now for me, business here is a generic term. So it doesn't mean corporate or for profit. In this sense, business is about getting the work that you need to do. My mom always used to say, mind your own business. So that's what we mean by business. So don't feel put off if you are a nonprofit or a public sector entity that you can't use business items. No, you can. And finally, the next largest word there is model. Model means a representation or a structure. So when we put those four large words together, regardless of what the name of a capability maturity maturity model is. It's a visual representation of how mature a capability is. So that's our definition. That's what we're working towards. And just as there are many names, there are many visual representations as well. So when I did a Google search of these names and did images, these are all items that popped up. So you have a wide variety to choose from. The things that I look for in a visual representation, number one, can I legally download it? So I don't want to be, taking things off the internet that have intellectual property rights. So that's one of the things. And then can I easily make changes? Do I have the graphic options in Word to recreate it? And do I have the skill set to recreate it? So like when I look in the upper left with the pyramid model, that looks pretty cool. But when I think about, could I recreate that in a document to share with people? That would be pretty time consuming for me. The one right next to it with all the squiggles and stuff, that also looks pretty cool. I clearly have no software that would help me do that. But the one in the very middle, I'm like, that's a bunch of text boxes and word art. I could recreate that kind of model. So keep that in mind when you're selecting your visual representation. Another thing I keep in mind is, do I need a lot of text? So again, going back to that one in the middle, you can add a lot of text to that, and maybe that serves your purpose. Or if you're trying to make it less complex, maybe these two on the bottom and the lower right are more straightforward. Because the last thing that I always keep in mind is, who is my audience? Who am I trying to get to buy into using the capability model? So I may have a group of creative people who are like, oh, I love the idea of the wandering path. Or I may have a group of concrete sequentials who say, oh, I want to know exactly, the green represents what's already been done and the gray is what hasn't been done. So think about that when you're choosing a visual representation. And as just as there are many variations on visual representations, there are just as many variations on the levels. Since I am not a detail person, I'm not really very specific on the level labels. So when I say level labels, it's step 1. So you could have steps, phase 2, stage 3, level 4, rung 5. Clearly you want to use the same one all the way across. But again, when you're deciding what word to put up there, I would think about the group that I'm working with. If I am working with a bunch of concrete sequentials, they might like the steps so they can check things off. If I'm working with more of an abstract concept, maybe we want phases because they can kind of morph into each other. If I have some competitive salespeople, maybe we're looking at rungs because they like to be climbing the ladder. So pick what works for the group. If I have a workplace culture that dictates, I might do that. If there's a strategic initiative that I'm connecting to and they use stages, then I might use stages. And finally, then too, the same keep in mind for the I guess the descriptors of each of those steps or phases. So this is a pretty standard one across the top, that you move from initial to managed to defined to qualitatively managed to optimized. No capabilities to an isolated capability, serving strategic to a differentiating capability. You can see that although it's the same concept, has a much different feel than the first one. Even now to where you could use pictures, lots of pictures and infographics these days. Again, select what's going to work for your group or people that you're working with. One of the things to note is you can see how many use the word optimized at the top. A couple words about optimized. One is you rarely achieve optimized. So true process improvement would say, once you hit that optimized level, you're looking around for the next thing and you're going back to the start of your maturity chart and you're moving down the chart again. More likely though, what happens as you're moving on your maturity level is disruptions happen. So I'm going to give a quick example of what that looks like in my own department. So we do training projects and we hire subject matter experts by the project in order to align them with the customer. And so we need to be efficient at purchase orders and instructor contracts that go with those purchase orders. And when we first started 10 years ago, there were no defined processes. So we were kind of, I would say, in crisis mode. So it was different every time. Business office wasn't aware. So we were constantly having to educate people and figure it out. And it took forever. Sometimes instructors wouldn't want to teach for us because they're like, I don't have time to do all this paperwork. And so we worked for years on getting a defined and standardized process in place. And we were pretty proud of ourselves. And then the pandemic hit, and literally all physical paperwork came to a stop because we were no longer in the office. And we used physical paper contracts at the time. So now, of course, we are back to crisis mode because we have to figure out how are we going to execute contracts when we're not in the office to pass paper around. So that restarted our maturity level journey. And we got that down pretty good. We maybe enjoyed that for about 5 months. And then MnState put in new contract software called Marketplace. And we were back to crisis mode where we had to figure out how to execute those contracts and train our instructors to use Marketplace. And so as we continue to cross the journey, we got to define, maybe standardize. The person who did this work in my office got a promotion and left. And now I was doing this work. I went back down into crisis mode and had to work my way back across. As I was working my way across, I've now hired a new person in my department to do that work. So back down to crisis mode with the new person, and we started working our way back across. And I don't even know if we hit defined or standardized when MnState gave us new software to use for our business office processes. And we're still in crisis mode. We don't know if it connects to our Marketplace software or not, or what we're supposed to do. So I don't want you to worry about if you never reach optimized. A lot of times reaching optimized is out of your control. But it still is important to define optimized, and we're going to talk more about that later. And I'm not keeping an eye on chat, so it looks like though we're good. So the importance of definitions. So even once you get those labels in place, you take a phrase like ad hoc. To me, ad hoc means impromptu, thrown together last minute. I'm going to say this is kind of an old-fashioned term now. I don't know how much younger generations use this. So ad hoc may not have any meaning to some of the people on my team or my instructors. So ad hoc would maybe be defined as inconsistent process or inconsistent product quality. Standardized. So it feels like this is a pretty common term. We would all understand what standardized means. But in my department, we do customized training. So we don't have a standardized product. It is different every time. So if I talk about we want a standardized training, that would confuse some people, or they'd be working towards a goal of making all the trainings look the same, and that's not what we want them doing. But in our department, when we are talking about standardized, we're talking about standardizing the process, not the product. So again, it's important to discuss what do these terms mean for you? And here we are back to the optimized. Now, the definition for optimized is to make perfect or to make as functional as possible. So as we talked about, you seldom achieve optimized before the cycle starts over again. But defining optimized helps who's ever working on that maturity with you to understand the goal and where you want to go. So for instance, if you're talking we'd like to have reactive customer focused service. So some people may be thinking, oh, that means when I'm working with customers, I'm always giving them whatever it wants, whatever discount they need, whatever it takes to make that customer happy. Or some people are saying that means I respond within 24 hours and close that ticket out. That's responsive. Some may say responsive means that I'm listening to them, I tell them I'm sorry, and that I'm sending their noting their complaint. Others may say that means that you need to provide me as a customer service rep with some boundaries of what I'm allowed to fix and not to fix, and then a ladder of where am I sending that problem next. So even one phrase like that can mean different things to different people, which is why it's important to define what those things mean. And the second part of optimized is to think about with your people, when is perfection not needed? So when is good enough good enough? So not every capability needs to be perfect. So even though you're using the term optimized, maybe your optimized is good enough. You're just making it as functional as possible. So again, using my department as an example, here are the capabilities that I hope we get near perfect. Finding and vetting qualified instructors, having our website content be up to date and having those clicks work, record keeping so that when people are earning badges, we know exactly which courses they've taken. And here are some capabilities that can be just good enough. Paperwork, as we mentioned before, to hire instructors. Now, it can't be terrible because those instructors will leave us, but we can have some bumps along the way because we have other relationships with our instructors that help see us through those bumpy times. So good enough for them. Processing purchase orders for supplies. Participants in training don't really care how we got the supplies there. So if we did a near perfect job of ordering them a month in advance and had them sitting in a box labeled for your training, great. If my instructor stopped at Target on the way to your training and bought what they needed, great. You wouldn't really know. So we can make that good enough. Our online learning platform. We have no say in our online learning platform. So we just make it good enough. We do the best we can with the product that we have. And so notice that when you are defining optimized, you want your near perfect stuff or perfect stuff, especially if you're a pacemaker person. I'd appreciate perfection on that. So you want those perfect things reserved for the critical interactions that you have, which are almost always the customer facing, external customer facing pieces. The behind the scenes stuff, that's where you can get away with the good enough. And of course, the stuff that is out of your control, you just won't ever be able to probably achieve perfection because it's out of your control. So keep the good enough conversations in mind when you're working on your definitions. We do have a class called the Risk Register, not a class, a free webinar that talks about analyzing risks and understanding where you need to spend your time and what things are good enough and what things you actually need to spend more time on. So I've put that link in the chat if you care to view that webinar, free webinar later on. All right. So I'm going to try to paste, here we go, into the chat. I've just put into the chat kind of the basic capability maturity model that I usually start with. I may not end there, but it's the one that I usually start with. So I think you can download that out of the chat if you're interested in that example. It's the one I've used here. And so you can take a look at what that model started as and then how I customized it. So I did a fictional pizza shop, and the capability that I chose to work on was pizza flavors. Now, I took just one swipe at this. It probably needs to be circled back and done in more detail. And I am not a pizza shop owner, so it's probably way off. So emphasis on the fictional part of the pizza shop. I think some interesting things to note is that while I was focusing on developing new flavors, if you look at where I ended up in the optimized, everyone in the organization contributes to new flavor ideas as part of their defined role. whether it's a suggestion to a pizza assembler or the assembler putting together a recipe, and customers start to contribute to pizza flavor development. Now, when I hit on that, like how to engage customers, what's interesting there is that optimized capability can now go into marketing capability, and it may affect our social media and maybe how people are going to submit pizza flavor recipes that we're voting on. And maybe there's discounts for customers who win monthly flavors, and keeping the monthly flavor idea also helps with PR and marketing. So while not part of evaluation necessarily, I think the exercise also helps you with just being creative and opening up and kind of seeing where things go. Now, sometimes this optimized is dictated to you, right? Your boss tells you this is what it looks like, or your company tells you this is what it looks like. But sometimes maybe you have a little more freedom, and using something like a capability maturity model can help you kind of think beyond the usual ideas that you have. So the initial phase here is that pizza assemblers kind of start doing this by customer request, but then they start saying, hey, you know, we kind of like doing this. Can we get some training on flavor profiles? So now it's starting to develop. Then we start to have recipes and in-house tastings, and our staff starts to select the best monthly flavors. So now this is a little more defined because leadership is leading the initiative. It's not just employees dipping in and doing it. And then managed. Once we get to managed, we're starting to evaluate the sales, what ones are most popular. We're maybe retiring old flavors and adding new flavors. And we're developing KPIs or process like recipes and how they're posted so that we can be standardized in our construction. So again, not knowing anything about, having never worked in a pizza place, that's my guess of how you could develop definitions for pizza flavors. A quick sidebar. So we talk about capabilities in our business architecture course. It's a very complex topic if it's done correctly. So I'm going to dip into it here and not do it justice. But level 1 capabilities are the broad categories that you need to run your business or to do that work. So for the pizza shop, there's pizza making, business processes, marketing, executing orders. In the chat, what other level 1 capabilities do you think the pizza shop needs in order to do their business? While you're thinking on that, I will talk about level 2. So then level 2 capabilities are where you take a level 1 capability and you break it down into parts. So pizza making may involve crust creation, recipes, tossing methods. We've already talked about flavor combinations, baking techniques, baking equipment, consistent assembly, and of course, probably many more. So in the chat, you have some level 1 capabilities: serving customers, billing and invoice, and payroll. So yes, so and again, no right or wrong answers to this. Where your level 1s, this is kind of an art and a science. So the business process could include the billing and invoice, ordering of supplies, in getting suppliers, setting up suppliers, capital investments. Payroll could be part of HR. So HR might be a level 1 capability that includes payroll and hiring and recruiting and onboarding. So again, more art than science. And you may find that, you know, as you figure out, maybe flavor combinations become such a thing that we actually have a level 3 or a level 4 and break those out even more. Right. But now here we are, returning to our pizza model. So we've now got our pizza model defined. And we want to use our fictional maturity model now to evaluate where we're at. How close are we to being optimized? So in our business architecture course, we talk about current state and future state. And this chart actually contains both. So the future state is the optimized. This is the goal we're working towards. And the other definitions, initial, developing, defined, managed, are our current state. But in order to know how to move from left to right, we can now take a look and say, okay, now that we've defined these, what is our current state? Are we at initial? Meaning we just have some interest, we're maybe kind of feeling this out. What are some things we might want to do to move things forward? Are we in developing? Have we noticed that there's interest in our assemblers? And we want to start figuring out how we can capture that interest and use it to our best to sell the pizzas in our shop. Oh no, the assemblers are already doing all these great flavors and everybody's interested. So how do we, now we've adapted that we're all about unique pizza flavors for our customers. How do we move from there to standardized, etc. So that's how this can become an evaluation tool. If you are using leadership methods and putting KPIs in place to manage and standardize, and you still have most of your people back on the development level, you're going to experience a lot of frustration with your team. So that's the importance of the evaluation piece. Figure out your current state to know what you need to do next. Now, I have to skip through a lot of participation. Sorry. Moving through my notes here. Let's say you are a store owner and you are on your way. You're up here at managed. You got recipes. You got everybody on board. And you're just getting ready to launch your first customer pizza contest to get to your optimized. You can put these in the chat again. What are some things that could happen that cause you to go to the left and back down the chart instead of continue moving forward to the optimized? So just put some things in the chat. What can happen to cause you to go to the left instead of to the right? You've got one staff turnover. I wholeheartedly agree. Supply issues. Yeah, maybe you've got a really great ingredient that's key to your recipe that you're using, and that supplier's like, yeah, we're not doing that ingredient anymore. Others? Oh, yeah. So maybe you're all excited, and right off the bat, you get some bad reviews on your flavors. Oh, yep. Breaking down of facility machines. Ooh, Catherine. Yeah. Maybe you didn't pay attention to the laws and regulations or new ones come into play. You guys have a great list. That was much better than my list. So yeah, I had things like staff turnover. So you've got two high school students who are great at assembling. They're your key leaders, and they graduate from high school and depart and go off to seek their fortunes, and now, right, staff turnover. Maybe the person in your group who's managing Facebook suddenly becomes ill and nobody else knows how to paste all this stuff and put it on the Facebook page. So yeah, you get the idea. And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I think it's important to know that you may need to evaluate your maturity more than once. If you've stalled out in the process and don't seem to be moving towards the left, towards optimized, then it's maybe time to take a look at, like, why is that happening? What are some of these things that maybe have come into play that you weren't even aware of, or you're aware but you didn't know? Because again, if you're trying to do things at a level of maturity that's more mature than your team is ready for, it's just going to lead to frustration. So what happens is your venture ends up looking more like a game of chutes and ladders, where you have some great spurts of productivity and maturity, and everybody's on the same page, and then you hit a shoot and you slide down. So this really kind of represents more what the maturity model journey looks like than the march across the page from left to right. One more example, we do, this is our capability maturity model for DEI. So if we have somebody tell us they're interested in DEI training, DEI training can be a number of audiences, leaders, employees, customers. It could be around HR policy. It could be around how we treat each other in the workplace. So this is pretty generic still, but it still gives our customers a way to take a look at where are they at in their DEI journey? Where do they want to be? And where are they at in trying to get there? And if they come to us and kind of talk through this model with us, that helps us determine what kind of DEI training we're providing. Because if we provide basic training and they're at managed, they're going to be like, what a waste of our time. But if we provide advanced training and they're at developing, they're going to say, check out and say, oh, we don't really need this training. All right. Recap quickly. Choose labels that align your organization's strategic initiative or industry standards. Choose the term level, stage, phase based on those things as well. Work alone to craft a first draft of the capability maturity model definitions, but then share it with others so that you have productive discussions and clearly defining optimization levels and determining the capability level that you want to target. What's really got to be perfect and what can be good enough. Define the maturity model so that it can be shared with others. Gather input on where people believe you are at on the model. We didn't really talk much about that today, but use it as a discussion tool and have them provide evidence. I think you can find, sometimes you learn that there's processes bubbling beneath the surface that you weren't even maybe aware of. I have a process improvement instructor who says there's always process, it just may not be written down. You may discover that people are jerry-rigging things, or people have found great workarounds that should be standardized. Reevaluate when progress seems to stall. Consider root cause analysis to dig deeper into the model than the model does. And do not lose sight of the customer. That optimized definition should be about the customer, whether that's an internal department you support, whether it's an external customer buying a product, or a citizen that you serve. If you're maturing for the sake of maturing, then that's not going to help you out either. Before I take questions, and I'm happy to stay on and take questions, I want to quick preview September. So I know you're all very aware that October is Employee Cybersecurity Month. So to get ready for that, we have an instructor from in-state going to speak to us about easy things that your employees can do to keep their information secure. I'm guessing they probably work for your home as well. Big breaking news today that all our social security numbers are out there. So this may be valuable to you. So while you think of questions, I had a few other links I'm going to quick paste into the chat for you. One of the things that helps with maturing is leading change. Here is a link to the free webinar on the change chart, and a link to the problem solving webinar. That's my instructor who talks about root cause analysis. And lastly, we've referenced our business architecture course quite a bit today. So here's a link to view that on the website. We are starting in winter of 2025. We will do a virtual course that's open to individuals, so you don't need to do that as a whole company. All right, and with that, I am back to questions. Go ahead and unmute, or if you want, I guess you can toss a question in the chat. Either way, and if you have no questions, thank you very much for joining and participating with us today. But like I said,